A hot woman, Teena, and her daughter Bethie are on their way home. Suddenly, they're cornered by a group of drunk thugs with malicious intent.
You want to stick around? You want to have a beer?
The mother tries to calm the situation while looking for an escape route, but the thugs pounce on them like savage dogs. The mother is knocked down by a brutal punch, and her daughter is snatched up on one of the attackers' shoulders. Both are dragged into an abandoned warehouse. They beg for mercy, but the thugs only become more aggressive. Bethie manages to squeeze into a narrow crevice, while outside, her mother endures a brutal attack. Once the thugs finally leave, she crawls out, trembling with fear. She tries desperately to wake up her mother, but the woman remains unconscious. Fighting back tears, she gently covers her mother's body and stumbles onto the street, in search of help. That's when a car pulls up, and two men step out. As fate would have it, they're Officer John and his partner. Following the girl's lead, John enters the abandoned building and finds the woman lying unconscious, severely injured, appearing lifeless. In an incredible twist, when he checks her ID, he realizes she's Teena, the woman he met at a bar days ago, the one who caught his interest. Rewind to a month earlier. John and his partner were tailing a suspect, keeping tabs on his every move. Just when they thought they had things under control, their target made a break for it, trying to escape by car. John didn't miss a beat, jumping into action and eventually nabbing the guy. But the win came at a devastating price. His partner took a fatal bullet in the struggle, leaving John desperately calling for backup. After losing his partner in such a violent way, John found himself at a bar, trying to numb the pain. That's where he'd met Teena, this attractive woman immediately drawing his attention. The bartender mentioned that her husband, a retired veteran, had passed away from cancer years ago, leaving Teena to raise their daughter alone.
No insurance, 6-year-old girl. Guy's gone in 2 months.
Later that night, Teena sidled up to John, venting about her friends over a few drinks.
Her boyfriend's going over the falls tonight. Dick had left the barrel in her car.
When she spotted his commendation photo on the wall, she was impressed.
I don't meet a lot of real-life heroes.
There's obvious chemistry between them, and before the night was over, Teena left John her number. A few days after their meeting, Teena and her daughter Bethie attended a lively family gathering. Casey, one of Teena's admirers, was also there. Though the charming Teena enjoyed the party, she remained a responsible, perhaps overprotective mother.
Bethel and McGuire, you get down right now or you'll break your neck!
As night fell, Teena chose to leave with Bethie. Despite Casey's insistence they stay overnight due to the late hour.
It's late. Why don't you guys just stay over?
Teena insisted on leaving. On their walk home, Bethie opened up to her mom, telling her she's tired of being babied and really missed her dad.
I can't remember what it looks like. That's right.
Teena pulled her daughter close, holding her tight. Then, fatefully, she decided to take a shortcut through the woods, a decision that's about to turn their world upside down. Back in the present, William calls for an ambulance and police, rushing Teena to the hospital. Bethie, deeply traumatized by the incident, finds comfort in her grandmother's presence. John comes to ask if Bethie can identify her mother's attackers.
I need your help.
Despite her trauma, Bethie bravely provides the information. The police move quickly, rounding up the suspects, who resist as best as they can. Though visibly shaken, Bethie helps the police by identifying her attackers at the station, ensuring they'll face justice.
The white tank top. And the one right next to him.
Later, Casey, who was at the party with Teena, stops by the hospital to check on her. But Bethie isn't doing well at all. John finds her curled up on a couch, crying and flinching at any man who comes near. He sits beside her, offering comfort through the chaos, and manages to ease her tension with gentle humor.
My favorite is Daffy Duck.
Meanwhile, the Fick family is desperately scrambling to protect their son from the consequences of his horrific crimes.
They're good boys. They didn't do it.
The mother, Irma, reaches out to their pastor, who connects them with Jay Kirkpatrick, a criminal defense lawyer known for handling tough cases. After reviewing the case, Jay exudes confidence about winning. He explains to the couple that juries only pick the stories they like. His job is simply to tell a compelling one.
So how much for your story?
But his storytelling comes with a hefty price tag, catching the fix completely off guard.
That's against a $50,000 retainer fee for each boy.
Desperate to save her son, Mrs. Fick offers up their new house deed as collateral for Jay's fees. When Walt tries to negotiate a discount, Jay reminds him that it's a small price to pay to keep their son from suffering.
You're paying me to keep your sons out of jail so that they don't get raped like that innocent woman.
A few days later, Teena's discharged from the hospital, though both her body and spirit remain wounded. Her mother takes her home where Bethie steps up to care for her. She stays close by, making sure her mom feels safe and supported during recovery. Teena is haunted by the trauma, having nightmares about the thugs attacked her. One night, she wakes up screaming, overwhelmed by vivid and terrifying memories. Her cries echo through the house, prompting Bethie to rush to her side. When Bethie enters the room, she finds her mother in the corner, crying and shaking with fear. Teena's mother quickly arrives, and together they comfort Teena, reassuring her she feels safe. The next morning, Bethie heads to a coffee shop with friends, desperately trying to find some sense of normalcy. But her attempt to escape the tension at home is quickly shattered. At the cafe, she's confronted by a girl, the sister of one of Teena's attackers, who aggressively warns her to keep quiet and not testify against her brother in court.
You and your whore mama better shut your faces. You hear me?
Jessica, Teena's attorney, is helping her prepare for the trial. Teena's visibly shaken at the thought of facing her attackers in court, but Bethie and her mother Agnes stand by her side, assuring her she's ready.
You're doing great. We're all set.
Jessica promises Teena they'll win, encouraging her to stand up not just for herself, but for millions of other girls who never got justice. The next day, John enters the courtroom. Teena arrives with Bethie and her lawyer, but Mrs. Fick interrupts them.
You lying whore.
Jay, the defense attorney, arrives and introduces himself, clearly on familiar terms with the judge. As the trial begins, Jessica presents her charges, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the attack and appealing to the judge for justice.
This gruesome attack was intended to lead to the death of Mrs. McGuire.
She calls John to the stand first, questioning him about the night of Teena's attack. But Jay keeps interrupting, undermining Jessica's arguments. When Teena takes the stand as the victim, the judge deliberately makes things harder, forcing her to remove her protective sunglasses.
Would you mind removing the sunglasses? It's really not that bright in here.
As Jessica continues questioning, Jay repeatedly provokes Teena. The judge, seemingly in Jay's pocket, shows clear bias against Teena, pushing her to an emotional breaking point.
Please wait for the next question, Mrs. McGuire.
Where she loses control, screaming about the judge's prejudice.
Yes, they're there. They're right there.
John watches helplessly as chaos unfolds. While Jessica pleads for justice, Jay starts spinning his own twisted version of story, claiming the attack was just a monetary dispute gone wrong and completely consensual.
But it wasn't rape. It was consensual.
He paints a picture of Teena drinking heavily at her boyfriend's party, getting into an argument, then meeting the defendants at Rocky Point Park, where she allegedly offered sexual favors for money.
And she offered to trade money for sex.
The dispute, he claims, arose when Teena demanded more money. Jay portrays his clients as innocent, labeling Teena's testimony as false and depicting her as an alcoholic and irresponsible mother.
Whose mother was so derelict as a parent to drag her to a drunken orgy of a 4th of July party.
The courtroom audience seems to buy it, sending Teena into panic. She starts screaming at the judge, completely losing it, though her lawyer tries to calm her. John helps her up and she leaves the courtroom with her daughter. The injustice Teena faces infuriates him. Meanwhile, a doctor visits Teena, prescribing sleeping pills. A knock at the door reveals Teena's mother, confronting Teena's lawyer, Jessica. Furiously, she berates the lawyer for failing to defend Teena in court and demands she leave. Despite the lawyer's assurances that she's doing everything possible to win, Teena's mother refuses to listen
I need you to leave.
and slams the door. In her room, Teena contemplates taking all the pills, but in a fit of rage, throws them away instead. She heads to a bar, drowning her sorrows in beer. As she wanders the city in a deteriorating state, she finds herself by a waterfall, staring at the rushing water below. Just as she's about to jump, John pulls her back from the edge.
You have a daughter. Don't let her lose her mother, too.
Teena breaks down crying in John's arms, unable to control her tears as he tries to comfort her. He takes her home. When Bethie returns from school looking for her cat, calling its name without success, she notices Teena with John. He tells Bethie to watch over Teena carefully, warning her that her mom isn't doing well.
You gotta keep an eye on her. You gotta take real good care of her.
He gives Bethie his number, telling her to call if anything happens. Shortly after, Bethie hears her cat's bell and goes to investigate. To her horror, she finds her cat dead, hanging on the door, with one of the criminals mocking her outside in a car. Terrified, she screams at him to leave them alone.
Leave us alone!
And runs inside crying. She immediately calls John, pleading for help. She buries her cat in the backyard, digging a small grave. When Teena's mother arrives home looking for the cat, Bethie pretends everything's fine. Meanwhile, at a local bar, Jimmy, one of the attackers, loses a $20 bet to Casey, who's having a beer. Jimmy starts threatening him, boasting about what they did to Teena.
Because I'm going to do you just like I did Teena.
Until the bartender steps in to break up the argument. Jimmy storms out, unaware that John has been watching intently from his seat. Later, as Casey leaves the bar and heads to his car, Jimmy jumps him. John arrives during the fight, shoots Jimmy dead on the spot, and calls an ambulance for Casey. John is arrested and questioned, but there is no evidence that the accident was premeditated, and John fought back in self-defense. Meanwhile, Jay and Jessica meet with the judge, who denies Jessica's request for more time. Over coffee, the two lawyers discuss the case. Jay smugly suggests it'll be dismissed soon, warning Jessica not to give Teena false hope. They negotiate a deal for minor assault charges, reasoning that evidence is thin and the town will soon forget.
That's a hard case to win in any venue. And in this town by next week, case dismissed.
Later, Jay meets with the accused boys, proposing they plead guilty for a 3-year sentence to close the case. But Mrs. Fick adamantly insists on her son's innocence, refusing the deal.
We are the victims. That drunk bitch came onto us, selling her ass.
Jay explains the risks of a jury trial, warning they could face 20 years in state prison if they lose. Despite his advice to think it over, Mrs. Fick maintains that Teena is lying.
My boys are not pleading guilty to something they did not do.
John stands anxiously near Niagara Falls. The scene shifts to Marvin and Lloyd getting tattoos. Marvin receives a call from an investigator claiming to work for Jay, saying he's found a solution to their problems. Marvin grabs Lloyd and they rush to meet him. When Lloyd asks about the investigator, Marvin explains he has evidence against Teena that could win their case.
I mean, he's got proof that she sells her, proof she likes it rough, pictures, sworn statements.
They arrive at Niagara Falls but find John instead. He shoots Lloyd, sending him plunging into the water. When Marvin charges at him, John fires multiple shots, ending him too. The next morning, media swarms Mrs. Fick's house, asking about the boys. She claims Teena drove them away, but reporters suggest they fled the country to avoid prosecution.
We lost our house. That's what happened.
The Ficks have lost not only their sons, but also their house to legal fees. Meanwhile, Bethie and Teena are watching the news. When Bethie anxiously asks if they'll return, Teena assures her they're safe now. Teena's mom invites Bethie to shopping. At the store, while Teena's mom checks out shoes, Fritz appears behind and threatens Bethie to stay quiet in court.
Before the boathouse, I was gone. That's what you say in court.
Panicked, she rushes home with Teena worriedly following. Fritz receives a call from a woman calling herself Ellen, claiming to be his college junior, and she could offer him useful evidence against Teena. She arranges to meet him at a motel. When he arrives calling her name, John shows up with a gun, pointing on his head, forcing Fritz to sit and write down confession about what he did to Teena. When Fritz is done, John shoots him dead. Despite his colleagues' suspicions, they can't prove John's involvement. The next morning, Bethie and Teena pack their bags, ready to start a new life somewhere. John confronts Jay, condemning him for defending criminals. Jay coolly responds that he's just doing his paid job, suggesting John might need his services someday. Later, Bethie and Teena visit John to thank him. Teena gives them privacy to talk. Tearfully, Bethie thanks John for saving her mother, confessing that Teena wouldn't be alive without him. John calls Bethie his daughter and wishes her well on their new journey to California. They say their goodbyes as John receives a call about another case.